Welcome back. Let's finish setting up the last two routes in our server. We first have the profile user ID, which is a GET request. That is, we want to get the user for their homepage. Let's do that. I'm going to add another route. This time it'll just be a GET request, and it's going to accept profile and an ID. Remember that if we do it with this syntax, that means we can enter in our browser anything, and we'll be able to grab this ID through the request.params property. All right, we will again do the same thing, request response. And let's add a space here to keep things clean. And within this request response, we want to, first of all, grab the parameter ID. So let's do const ID will be coming from request.params. And what should we do here? Well, in order to get our users, we want to loop through our sample database and find the matching ID. If it matches, we want to return the user. All right, we can't avoid it any longer. We have to do a for loop here. The way we do that is we can just do database.users. Although I like using map for this case, we're just looping through the users and we don't really need to create a new array. It's just a database. And we want to keep that constant, so we'll just say for each. And if you remember, for each will run through the users one at a time. And we'll say that if user.id, which is what we'll get from the database, equals the ID that we received from the params, if that's the case, we will respond with JSON that user. We'll just send the user of the matching ID. Otherwise, we will respond with JSON no such user. And we can even say that it's a status of 404, which means not found. All right, let's see if this works. I'm going to save. Go back to our example. Well, we know that we have 123 and 124, and because the server restarted, we won't have an. We want to grab profile 123. If we click send, I get 200. Okay, all right, we got John. If I do 124, I get no such user. If we go back here, Sally should be here. How come we're not getting her? And we see here that we get an error here. Can't set headers after they are sent. That is because we're looping through this. And instead of returning from the loop, because once we find the user ID, we don't really need to keep looping. So here, we should just be sending a return response JSON. And if the user isn't found, well, we don't necessarily want to do that in the loop, do we? We want to say that for each, if this user is found, return response JSON. And we'll say that a variable found, which will default to false, will also get updated with true. And it'll have to be a let because we're reassigning it. So found will equal to true if we find it. And I know there's better ways of doing it, but again, I think this will illustrate a point. We could also do a map or a filter to see if we actually find a person with an ID. But for now, let's just do if isn't found, so the opposite of found. In that case, we'll just respond with status 400 JSON not found. Let's give that a go. All right, I get Sally. If I go 1, 2, 3, I get John. Perfect. And just for fun, let's register. And again, I'm going to hit send. And her ID is 125. So if I go back to profile and do 125, I get Anne. How cool is that? Awesome. So we have this endpoint working, and we have one last one, which is the image. And this one, we just wanted to update the user to increase their entries count. Every time they submit an image, we want to increase their entries. Let's do that by creating our final endpoint, which is app.post. And we'll call it image. We'll get a request response. And again, here we will have to find the ID of the user again to update their entries. In this case, we can just copy what we've done before. And anytime we need to copy some sort of a function, well, it's a good time to actually pull it out and create your own function so you can use it in both of these. But for now, let's just copy and paste. And instead of actually having params, in our case, we will receive the user's ID from the body. And now we want to say that, we want to copy this bottom part as well. We'll say that if the user ID matches, in that case, we will respond with the user dot entries. And this entries we want to actually increase. So we'll say that user.entries plus plus. Remember, that's a short form of me doing +1 and reassigning it. So we'll just do plus plus. And now the entries of the user should increase, and then we'll respond with that. If that doesn't work, if the user wasn't found, in that case, we'll just keep it the way it is. User was not found. Let's save that and go back to Postman. We'll say image, and within this image, we will have a post request, which means a body. And we can just pass the user's ID. In our case, we'll say ID 123, which is John's ID. And we'll click send. I get 1. If I click again, I get 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I go back to the root, which returns our users, and change that to get, I get John with 5 entries and Sally with 0 entries. Let's make sure it works for Sally as well. If I do 1, 2, 4, I get now entries of 1. And going back to the get users, I get John with 5 entries and Sally with 1 entry. Amazing. We got ourselves a nice API server. It can definitely improve. There's a few things that we obviously want to change, such as sign in to not just have it for John. We have a few repetition of code that perhaps we can extract this out into a function. But I wanted us to have something working, something that we can use so that we can connect it immediately with our front end. We can finally delete our commented out section where we planned what our API is going to look like. Good job getting this far. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.